PDA, Pathological Demand Avoidance Syndrome. Presentation 3, Managing PDA in School. Children with PDA are frequently unable to cope with the everyday demands placed on them by schools. Though PDA is not an officially recognised diagnosis, there is good evidence that children with PDA behaviours require very different approaches to their learning and behaviour management. Please see Presentation 1 and 2 for more information about the behaviours associated with PDA. PDA children and school. PDA is a condition that often goes unrecognised until a child starts formal education. It can take both staff and parents by surprise. The behaviour of a child with PDA can quickly de-skill the most experienced of teachers. Parents can feel unprepared and shocked by what the school is telling them about their child. Parents tend to adapt so completely that they are unprepared for the extent of failure once a child is subjected to the group demands of nursery or school. PDA children and nursery. Difficulties often go unrecognised at nurseries and at the start of the school reception classes. This is because there are generally very few demands placed on children of this age. The curriculum in nurseries is usually set up for child-initiated learning, meaning that the child is able to follow their own agenda for most of the time. Staff will set up a range of learning activities and encourage participation, but they rarely try to enforce this. Staff may report to parents that the child is strong-willed or likes to do their own thing. They may also report disagreements with peers, occasionally involving hitting, pinching and biting. However, at this stage the demands are limited and the child is often coping with these by charmingly using avoidance behaviours. PDA children and school. During the reception year, expectations of compliant behaviour increase and this leads to confrontations. The normal school approaches to behaviour management lead to meltdowns, outright defiance and running away. It is also not uncommon for the child to lash out at staff and throw things. Staff are suddenly struggling to manage the child's behaviour and parents are called in. PDA children's parents and school. Parents are genuinely shocked by what they hear and can't understand what is going wrong. They naturally search for explanations to explain their child's behaviour. Is my child being bullied? Is the work being set appropriate? Are staff handling the situation properly? The relationship between school and parents can easily break down. This is particularly so if the child is receiving fixed-term exclusions for disruptive outbursts in class. Meeting the needs of a PDA child. The school's response to a child with PDA behaviours will vary depending on the nature of the challenge presented, the inclusive ethos of the school, the capacity of the school, parental wishes and engagement. The school will also need to plan how they will manage the child during an incident, in the short term, and looking further ahead to the long-term provision for the child. This will require the involvement of outside agencies to determine underlying causes to behaviour, provide advice and strategies to the school, gain additional resourcing for the child, and to provide access to support for parents. Dealing with an incident. It is not uncommon for PDA children to become highly aggressive if a demand is forced on them. This can involve lashing out, hitting, biting, etc., throwing things at the person making the demand, upturning furniture, scattering things on surfaces, tearing displays, damaging computers, etc. It can also involve destroying other children's work. Staff need to ensure their own safety and that of other children and adults. Staff working with a child who has already exhibited violent behaviour need to be trained in restrictive physical intervention and de-escalation techniques. All staff who have contact with the child should have access to the child's risk assessment document. This should explicitly describe how staff should manage each situation. This document should be shared with parents, though they cannot dictate the content of it. PDA children will often try and run away. When unable to run away, they are likely to go into a rage and be aggressive. Thus, it is the management of the child at this point that often determines whether total meltdown will occur. Where possible, it is better for the child to run away and find a quiet space where their anxiety can reduce. There is a difficult balance to be achieved in wanting to watch over them and allowing them the space that they need. When a child runs away, it is best practice to avoid chasing after the child. This will generally only make them go further, and they will risk more to get away from you. Try to observe from a distance, minimise the child seeing you, and give them plenty of time to calm down before approaching with a distractive activity. Where the child frequently runs away, try to encourage the use of a designated safe place. This could be a playhouse or a pop-up tent, under the beanbag and soft cushions, under coats, a small room with an internal window, a playground play building or other sheltered area. Immediate management of PDA. As the difficulties that the PDA children experience often become apparent unexpectedly, many schools will be unprepared to meet their needs. Schools will initially be reactive rather than proactive in their management. This is likely to include being sent home, fixed term exclusions, in response to violent meltdowns and other behaviours where the child is out of the care and control of the school. This may also involve a temporary reduction in the length of the school day for the child, particularly if the child is below compulsory school age. Parental agreement is required for this, and there should always be an agreed timetable for building up to full-time attendance again. Schools will generally ask parents for permission to contact local authority services such as specialist behaviour support teachers and educational psychologists. Managing PDA in the short term. At this stage, the child may not have an official medical diagnosis of PDA. However, the school will be able to create an action plan based on the observed behaviours of the child and any specialist advice available. Managing PDA in the short term is likely to include adapting the curriculum to minimise direct demands. You can achieve this by providing choices of activities, maintaining high amounts of child-initiated learning, and keeping adult-directed tasks short. The child is likely to need additional adult support. Many PDA children require full-time cover. Staff will need training in strategies for managing PDA, see presentation 4, and possibly restrictive physical intervention. One-to-one staff need to be highly patient and calm. Managing a PDA child may include part-time attendance. Where the child is below compulsory education, this should always be considered. For those above compulsory education, it can be put in place for short periods as a way of avoiding permanent exclusions. Managing a PDA child may involve teaching them on their own. If the child is highly disruptive to the learning of others, it may be necessary for the child to be withdrawn from class. This may be for all or some lessons. If the child is coping with playtimes, they should join their peers at breaks. A school will need to ensure that they have regular parent meetings. It is important that parents are kept informed about incidents, progress towards integration. Any setbacks and successes should be shared as well. Where the child is withdrawn from class or attending part-time, this should be weekly or at least fortnightly. Managing PDA in the long term. The long-term goals for PDA children remain the same as for all children. Achieving their learning potential. PDA children often require a reduced curriculum delivered through incidental learning, child-initiated learning, and gradually increased periods of adult-directed learning. PDA children will need help with developing appropriate social skills. PDA children need quality interventions to help them understand social rules and particularly social hierarchy. They need support with developing understanding of non-literal language. PDA children will also need help with developing resilience. They need quality interventions to help them manage anxiety and anger. They need to be explicitly taught emotional self-awareness. and they will need calming strategies. Most PDA children continue to require additional support throughout their schooling. Some cope better than others, and their needs can be met by their local schools. For a few, specialist provision is often necessary. Strategies for managing PDA children is the subject of presentation 4.